Hey, welcome to the latest episode of The Wellbeing Show. I'm your host, Noel, and I'm joined by Brandon Bishop from across the pond, I saw a press release about a new social networking site. He's going to tell us about it in a bit, once we get to know him a bit, which starts from the point of having EQ or emotional intelligence. And I read that and I went, blimey, I'm glad somebody's done that. Sort of with the way online relationships are going these days. So I was very excited to get him on. Um, Before that, just to let you know, it is pre-recorded this. So we record it as though it's live and it may feel live to you, but when you're watching it, do remember it's not. I'll give you my number, folks, and happy to for you to sort of send messages on WhatsApp, etc. But don't call because I might be out doing something. You might get a grumpy old man instead of a really nice bloke fielding your questions. But send me messages on WhatsApp, and I'm sure Brandon at some point will tell you about how to contact him, and you can send him messages and, in fact, join his service. So my number's 07506 319 745. It's +44 if you're messaging from outside of the UK. That's enough for me. Welcome, Brandon. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Noel. Thank you for having me. I feel that it's an honor to meet someone else, especially an adult male who understands the importance of emotional intelligence. So I'm very happy to be here.
I'm less the adult. I'll take male. All right. But it's like literally that's one of the things I said to you before the show is, oh, it's always nice when I meet a bloke who wants to talk about emotional intelligence. And we're not so thin on the ground, but it is unusual. And it's a pleasant surprise always. So I'm really, really pleased to be meeting you in this way. So where are you based exactly? Tell folks where you are.
Um, in St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States.
That's one of the southern states.
Sure, it's considered Midwestern here.
Is it? Okay. So that's useful to know. And is that where you grew up? Is that where you're from, Brandon, originally?
No, I'm actually from Alabama. So I grew up in Alabama for the first 16 years of my life. Then I moved to Florida. I joined a religious cult, and then I moved out west, and have had an amazing life that's taught me many things. So I mean, I'll share more as we go.
That's all right. I've got quite a few mates from the US who are ex-cultists and very interesting and sometimes very frightening experiences for people. So we'd be
Hmm,
interested to talk about.
sure.
Were you brought up in a large family, a small family? What was the sort of family dynamics like for you?
My family dynamics are really interesting, and
Uh,
it's yeah. So both of my parents were 15 when I was born. My
15.
mother, yes, my mother was the youngest of six children, and
Sorry, I sounded surprised, but that's quite young to be having children when people.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, you should probably give a trigger warning because if we're going to talk about my parents and my life, I'm going to be sharing a lot about abuse,
Yeah.
and I want everyone who's listening to realize that's part of my story, and
Okay.
I can't tell my story without talking about it.
Thank you. Thanks for letting us know. And folks, just to be aware, we're going to talk about this stuff, even though, because I agree with Brandon, it is subject matter that's worthy of discussing. Um, but think about your own being compassionate to yourself in the way that you listen. If it's disturbing and upsetting, remember it's a recording, so you don't have to sit frozen. You can stop it, take a break, and come back to it, folks. And also remember if it is upsetting in a way that's triggering maybe experiences that you haven't processed, then please do stop, relax, reach out to a friend, talk to them, talk through it, and take your health and safety very seriously. But it's also, I think, really important to hear these stories and realize that recovery is more than possible. And not only that, you can transform experience, which is, and Brandon's in that sort of league of gentlemen who have transformed experience and are willing to share about it. So, um, if you feel suicidal, if this does bring out, remember there are organisations, certainly in the UK, you can call the Samaritans, and it's not unusual if you have a flashback to feel like maybe you want to hurt yourself or something like that. That's absolutely normal. But just make sure you're talking to somebody about it. With that, Brandon, tell us about your parents, your family, that childhood experience. And again, same for you, Brandon. Do look after yourself, mate.
Thank you, thank you. I've contemplated on my life a lot, so I've reached a
Yeah,
point now where I feel like I can help others, so I can share without, you know, without reservation in that way.
super.
Thank you for thinking of me. So going back to my parents, yeah, both of my parents were 15 when I was born. They were 14 when I was conceived. And that is unusual, but it isn't unusual if you consider the circumstances. My mother was sexually abused by her older brother from an early age,
Right.
and that sexual abuse led her to a life of promiscuity and drug abuse.
Yeah.
So when people go through trauma, sexual trauma specifically, and they don't have, as she didn't have any support. She really didn't feel like she could tell anyone, and when she did, she was made to feel like she shouldn't. They start
Sadly,
looking for
very
coping
often the case,
mechanisms.
isn't it? It's sadly,
Well, it is, and especially for her because the brother who abused her. Remember, she's the youngest of six, and the brother who abused her, he was everyone's favorite. He was a great baseball player. He cut everyone's lawn. He was really a model guy. When you talk about predators, there's this idea that you can always look at one and know exactly
oh,
who they
right. Yeah,
are.
exactly.
But, someone can be 99% amazing. And then that 1% of them can cause trauma to people that casts long shadows over their life. And I would say that's the experience because everyone who remembers her brother only thinks of him fondly.
Yeah.
And because
And
I think
also, if you don't
most of
mind
his
me
life was
saying,
that.
sorry to interrupt, but just to say as well, the figures show that very often it's the predator is somebody that you know well.
Hmm.
It's not a stranger, and sort of we tend to get fixated on this stranger danger stuff, and people just don't seem to want to understand that it's people in positions of trust and authority.
And proximity.
That's right, that have access,
Yeah.
and they often will be trusted, and they'll often work will have often worked on that image to be trusted as well, so that
Mhm.
they have some power to manipulate, control, and deny and gaslight the victim. So it's very important, I think, those types of dynamics that people understand. So please carry on. So your mum had had this really awful childhood, being predated upon by her own brother, and then
Yeah, and so then she tries to cope, and I think like a lot of people who go through abuse, um, she she turned to drugs, she turned to alcohol, she turned to promiscuity, and I am the result of that promiscuity. So I really didn't know my father. I always knew who my father was. His twin sister. I'm from a very small town, Noel. So when my mom was pregnant, everybody knows everyone. She was still in high school. She might have been the summer between middle school and high school. But my dad's twin sister, she came to visit my mother when my mother was in the hospital. And when I was as a baby, a newborn baby, she recognized me as her family. And, it was, I always knew who my dad was, but there was no close relationship there at all. So I was raised by my grandparents. My mother's
yeah,
parents raised me.
yeah.
Um, and my mom spent most of her days outside of the house. I didn't grow up with my mom living in the home, even though she was young. I never saw her.
Hmm.
So I was kind of like my grandparents' seventh child. But
Yeah.
then eventually, my mother, when she was 22, this was after she had gotten out of prison. My mother ended up going to Julia Tutwiler State Penitentiary for assault, not assault on me. She got into a fight with another teenager over some drugs,
Yeah.
and she ended up running her over in her car, and that got her a prison sentence. So I think it was third degree is what she was finally convicted on. And when she got out of prison, she got married to a Vietnam vet, and my grandparents told her, okay, this is your son. We've had him for 8 years. Now you need to go ahead and take him on. And so she did. I moved in with her and her new husband. Both of them were strangers to me, Noel.
Yeah.
Remember, I did not grow up with my mother,
Yeah. Yeah.
even though she was my mom.
Yeah.
So I moved out of my grandparents' home. Um,
And
and
also, one imagines Vietnam veteran that they carry some baggage themselves as well. They're not
Yeah, I would say
free of
so.
stuff.
definitely my grandmother, looking back, I didn't realize it then, but now looking back, my grandmother battled with mental illness.
Yeah.
We had a house infested with roaches. It was never clean. Now I remember what like my grandmother smelled like, and she always carried a lot of body odor. She didn't bathe regularly. So there was a lot of mental illness with her as well.
Yeah.
Um, and then actually, as soon as I moved out, my grandparents divorced, and they both moved in with the people who they really loved. They had basically been loving someone else, both of them, for years, but they're old school. So they stayed together because they had me, but they needed me out so they could go live their life. And
Yeah.
that's what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
So,
your stepfather, he was a veteran of a war, so I imagine he was struggling as well, and to some extent, particularly if he was involved with your mum.
yeah, he kept some secrets in that way. So and my mom did not know this. And by this time at 22, my mom was clean. She wasn't drinking. She wasn't doing drugs.
I
She was
see.
very happy. Yeah, she was very happy to be a stay-at-home mom. And she ended up getting pregnant pretty quickly with my little sister. But my stepdad was an alcoholic and he was addicted to crack.
Yeah.
And she didn't realize this. And I remember the first time I'd ever seen domestic violence was probably within the first month of me living with
Sure.
them. My mom was cleaning house and she found a bag of maybe crack, maybe cocaine. It depended on how much money he had, what drug he would choose. But she found a bag stuffed in the bottom of a shoe,
Hmm.
and she decided she was going to hide it. And so she hid that bag of drugs.
Hmm.
And when he went looking for it and he couldn't find it, all hell broke loose. And so
Yeah.
that was the first time I'd ever seen, you know, in person, someone get, you know, drug around on the ground by their ponytail, picked up by their throat, and their head
Yeah.
slung into a china cabinet, breaking all the glass and all the dishes inside. It was scary. It was very, very, very scary.
And again, I'm just going to remind people that these are difficult topics. I grew up in a very violent household myself, and so I processed a lot of this stuff, and clearly Brandon has as well. But if you haven't, and these are bringing up, um, you may notice signs in yourself. You may notice signs of fear, shortness of breath, your heartbeat rising, dry mouth, or suddenly sweaty palms, or something like that. Do take a break, relax, get control of your breathing, get into your body, and have your feelings. Maybe pause the show for a while and go off and do something. Go and look at a plant is always a good idea. Have a chat with a plant or stroke a cat and then come back to it. But it's well worth staying through, folks, because it's really important to understand that no matter what, with support and help, you can get through these things and transform your life. Sorry to interrupt, Brandon. Um,
No, no, I understand completely. I think, I would have healed much faster had I had support and had I had the opportunity to hear something
exactly.
like this when I was younger, it would have been
That's right.
very helpful. So, no,
Because I think these experiences, you tell me if yours was different, but certainly I think growing up in these types of experiences, it can leave us feeling very lonely and isolated. And that's part of what the sadness of that thing is, that
mhm.
we become very strange to be around.
Yeah, no,
People step
absolutely.
away from us, you know?
Yeah, you when you carry that kind of weight, and you've had those types of experiences, it's difficult for you to relate. And I don't think it's because there's any, of course, there's nothing wrong with you, but when you're a child who's lived these experiences, it's hard for you to relate to your peers who may have had a more nurturing upbringing.
Yeah.
And not only that, I mean, parents who, even myself, raised their children in very nurturing, supportive homes. The risk involved in allowing kids to sort of hang out with kids who grew up like us. I
That's
mean, the
right.
parents were
That's
unpredictable.
right.
Everything's unpredictable. Who knows what's going to happen if you go over
Yes.
there? So we're left lonely in that way as well. Like, conscientious parents understand that while this kid may be nice, we don't really know what's going on there, so you can't hang out. But at the
I
same
remember
time,
I had this experience. You may have had similar experiences. So, because every child it brought up thinks their experience of being brought up is normal and the same for everybody else.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
And it's really strange when you discover it's not. And I remember I was in a friend's house after school and I accidentally broke something. And I froze because in my house, if you broke something, you were going to get assaulted.
Hmm.
In his house, they came up to me in a solicitous manner and asked me if I was okay and weren't at
Yeah.
all interested in the object that was broken. Wanted to make sure I was okay. And you know what? I thought they were weird. I thought,
Yeah.
what a strange group of people. Why don't you hit me? It's like very strange. What was did you're nodding away in identification there?
Yeah, I'm nodding away because it's so common for us when we live in these like echo chambers, and you know, all of our families are insular in some ways. It's so easy to think that that's how everyone else lives. But what a powerful experience it was for you, Noel, and
Yeah,
for me as well, to see that there are different family dynamics out there. And that sort of plants the seed that things don't have to be
that's
the
right.
way that you've experienced them, which is a powerful teaching opportunity in and of itself.
So you're in this frightening, unpredictable environment from an environment that, although probably suboptimal, wasn't like that. So that must have been quite a shock to you, to go from a place where you felt more loved, I suppose, by your grandparents, and then suddenly to be in this environment with these strangers, who turned out to be very strange.
Yeah, my grandparents, I did feel very safe. Although I will say, now that I've an adult and I've had therapy, I've learned that my upbringing, I was very neglected.
Yeah,
It
that's classic because the smell and stuff like that. It's classic
Yeah,
neglect. Yeah,
yeah, I did feel love, but also I was kind of like a feral child, right? I
yeah.
was always at the neighbors' homes, and I was always like outside with no clothes on and barefooted and in the woods, and I was just that kid in the neighborhood who was not being looked after, and that introduced me to some predators in our community as
Yeah,
well. So it
yeah,
kind of like,
yeah.
it just happens that way,
Because they see kids
unfortunately.
like that who are obviously vulnerable, and
Well, predators know who to look for, right?
they really do.
Yeah.
But you move in with you have a sister at this point, and the violence is happening, obviously, because once that genie is out the bottle, it doesn't go back in. And
Yeah.
what was it? How long were you there and going to school? And so, what sort of age are you now?
So they were married for 4 years. And in that 4 years, it's hard to keep track of how many times we moved out and moved back in, and we moved out and we moved back in. I live with every single aunt and uncle I have, except for the uncle that had abused my mom. Of course, she wasn't going to like rely on him for any help. But through those 4 years, I lived with every other aunt and uncle. And my mom stayed with my stepdad and her daughter while I lived an entire year as a 12-year-old with my aunt, with one of my aunts and her two daughters.
Yeah.
Um, and that was a more peaceful experience for me because I felt very safe there. And my aunt is a very loving, nurturing person, and she had two daughters who were, like real sweethearts. So that was a nice experience for me to have. But I ended up moving back in with my mom, and eventually they did get divorced.
Hmm.
By that time, I think I transferred in and out of, I don't know, 6 schools or so. We moved around a lot. It's not like I moved in with them and we had a home and that's where we stayed. We were always moving. If it wasn't with him, it was escaping him. So they divorced when I was in the seventh grade. So yeah, that seems about right. Um,
So what age are you then, do you think?
I think it must have been 12.
12, okay.
So yeah, so from 8 to 12 is when they were together. And I really was so excited about their divorce because I
Yeah.
was you know, witnessing. So luckily, right, I witnessed abuse, but he never touched me, and he never touched his daughter, my sister Brittany. He wasn't violent at all toward us. I mean, he drank a lot, and he had his drug addiction, but
You've just brought up a really important point, and if you don't mind, I want to make this point.
yeah,
So a child watching another adult be assaulted in the home, it's irrelevant. The psychological damage is the same, whether the child is directly assaulted or not. Because, and we know this from research, that the trauma and the PTSD and the symptoms, because the child is dependent on those adults. And if they're exposed to what they perceive as life-threatening situations, highly stressful, then it's just as traumatic. So
Mm,
often I hear people say that, but it doesn't matter whether you got assaulted, you were assaulted. And in the
mm,
UK, certainly, um, if children witness violence in the home, that is classified as physical abuse, whether or not they're physically touched. So the law is very clear in the UK. I'm not quite sure in America whether it's the same, but we
mm.
know from the research that the damage is done simply witnessing it. To be honest, it's a very frightening and difficult place to be for a child.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say I was very suicidal. So one of the reasons I
Oh,
lived
yeah.
with my aunt and her two daughters was really contemplating and vocalizing my contemplation of suicide.
Yeah.
And my mom took me to a psychiatrist, and he evaluated me, and he said, you know, she gave him, he recommended, that I just maybe live somewhere else for a while, as not, I did, he didn't think I needed, medicine or anything, but probably living away from her was a good idea. And so that's why I moved in with my aunt and two sisters, and it was a great time. But no, I suffered, definitely emotionally. I suffered. It's funny, Noel, that those of us who go through this trauma, some of us end up like my mom and kind of like spiral. And then others of us, it's sort of like fuel for our emotional intelligence. We become socially aware extremely fast as a defense mechanism. And at least for me, I was very socially aware, but being so hyper fixated on everything that was around me and all of the people, I had to be very, very keen on body language. And I had to pay very close attention to how people were maneuvering because I wanted to keep myself safe. It meant that I didn't become self aware. It took me decades to develop any self awareness because I was so focused on everyone else. I became a great people
Brilliant way of
reader.
saying it, Brandon. So you
Yeah.
were hyper vigilant and looking for the danger signals and ready to get out of dodge just in case it came at you. Yeah. But there is the
Mm-hmm.
flip side of that. I think you're right. You start to read situations. You start to become, actually, it's quite a useful skill in some ways, isn't it? Later on in life. So your parents get divorced. You're relieved by the divorce. I understand that because the source of the fear and anxiety is gone, which is your stepfather. What
Mm-hmm.
was the next phase? What happened next?
Life got worse.
Right.
Life got worse. So at that point, my mom, who had been a single mom and relying on my stepdad for financial security, she now became a waitress at a truck stop, and she worked the graveyard shift. So I was 7. So what ended up happening is my mom would spend all night working at a truck stop as a waitress and all day sleeping. So, I became, the caregiver for my sister.
Mm.
And then my mom's need for extra money led her down, again, a path of promiscuity, and her guilt and shame led her to drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And now she was the only parent in our lives, and she quickly spiraled into a dark, dark place that she's been in for most of her life. I would say in the past month or so. I've kind of like helped her see things a little bit differently, but she's definitely suffered.
Or go. I mean, definitely, definitely. And we need to have compassion for people, even if as our parents, they're not so great. I mean, it sounds like your mum was trying her best.
Oh, my mom carried with her that little girl
Yeah.
on her shoulders, that little girl who was abused, that
Yeah.
little girl who needed to be loved, who needed to be trusted, who needed to be protected. She spent her whole life carrying that little girl on her shoulders. And all of her promiscuity, right? It was her desire for validation. All of her drugs and alcohol was to escape the sorrow and the pain.
Yeah.
She was doing nothing but trying to help that little girl who lived inside of her. And one day I helped her just kind of let that little girl go and
Right.
live for you now.
Right.
And I think that's helped her. But no, my mother did everything that she could, but she didn't have a lot to
No.
offer.
That's right. She did her best, but what she did wasn't too great. but it was the best she could do. And that's quite important as well. I think in terms of, I don't know what you think about this, but in terms of being able to recover and transform these types of experiences, being able to recognize the need to, forgive people for being the damaged goods that they are. And, obviously there are some people, some predators who are just very dangerous, who are intentionally hurting. But then there are people like your mum who themselves are equally victims. And she's not setting out to hurt you. She just doesn't have any capacity whatsoever to protect you. And that's a very different dynamic, I think.
Yeah. It's hard for you to love if you don't love yourself. And that's been my
That's
mom's,
very true.
that's been my
That's
mom's
really true.
experience.
Yeah.
But I will say, Noel, I was angry for a long time.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to think that, I've always been this understanding. I mean, this has been a long journey for me. I'm 42 years old, and it's only been within the past, I would say, maybe 3 to 5 years that I've reached a place in my life where I can see people who have maybe caused harm as unhealed versions of themselves. And if they were able to look inward and able to really figure out why they're passing on the trauma, they may be a better person, but it takes years of work.
Yeah, but I'm just going to challenge some of your language. Only is not allowed. You have achieved it, and that's the important thing. The
When
longevity.
did I, sorry, when did I say only? I want to take this lesson to heart.
Only for the last few years that have I been able to talk about it in this way.
Mm. Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's not true. You've done the work, and here you are. And it's really important that this is here you are. The other thing I would say, and this is something to take on, is that the risk for men like ours is that we become the things we hate, and we become the violent, obnoxious men that continue to perpetrate the abuse and perpetrate the trauma on other people because we don't own our damage and we don't do something about it, right? And
Mm.
so for me to be talking to another man who chose not to do that, I'm sure you've done that a bit. We've all done it a bit, right? But that you've taken responsibility for you and the what's happened in your life and you want to transform it. That does place you in a relatively select group. And I think it is something you should be proud of, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I am. I am proud, Noel, but I'm also very lonely.
Yeah.
With someone who grew up like I did, right? Not really having a father and not really having a
Yeah.
mother. I grew up with um, big emotional voids, and my desperate need for affection and love,
Yeah.
it it translated in some instances, in some seasons of my life, that it was clinginess. In other seasons of my life, it was extreme distrust. It's such a it's and we all go through, I think, different stages.
Yeah.
um
Absolutely.
it's very difficult to figure out why people
Part
are
of that, I
experiencing.
guess,
Yeah.
part of that is why you joined the cult, I imagine.
Oh
Is
my
that
goodness.
you were looking for,
You're spot on. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I came from a very dark place. And before I talk about it, I will say that, the word cult has a lot of derogatory associations with it. And I say that to say this: I look at small family businesses, religious institutions, and even some corporate America. They are their own version of a cult. And all I say when I say cult is it is a group of people who are buying into certain hierarchies and a system of beliefs that create a, an oppressed group. It creates people who are looking to outdo one another. It creates groups of people who are trying to be more righteous than one another or prove their righteousness. And I think it happens in all religions. So I just want to say, when I say cult, I'm not talking about the weird, scary ones. I'll be upfront. I joined the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints. And I will say, before we talk anything about that, joining that organization completely transformed my life for the good.
yeah,
I will say that, it was in that community that I saw structured families, and I saw It was the first time in my life that I even considered on going to college because I ended up joining the Mormon church in a very upper middle class suburb of Orlando, Florida. So I didn't grow up in an upper middle class home and I didn't have any of those values. So I adopted their social mores and I adopted their values. And by adopting those values, it, having access to that community, um, gave me a lot of privilege. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
need to say that
yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
it's an important part of my story that I would not be where I am today. But
I think
I did that because it felt right for me. And I think we always have to sort of like go with what feels right. People wanted me to, scare me out of the Mormon church. And I had to meet with Baptist ministers because my family was Southern Baptist. And it was, people really tried to dissuade me from it. But at the end of the day, no, I've learned in my life, I'm going to do what Brandon wants to do.
yeah.
And I've always felt like I've made the right choice.
And also, I think it's really important psychologically to be able to integrate experience and to
Mm-hmm.
recognize that it's not simplistic, this stuff, is it? It's not either
No, not at
good
all.
or bad. There's a mixture of both, and there are reasons why we do what we do. I remember
Yeah.
an ex head of the British Army was on an interview one day, and it was when people were suddenly up in arms about soldiers who get PTSD, and we now know what are the vulnerabilities that lead to PTSD in soldiers. And the interviewer said to him, "Well, why don't you just weed out those people with those vulnerabilities?" And he said, "Well, if I did that, I wouldn't have an army." Sort of like,
Yeah.
because similarly, the armed forces do a similar thing, that they
Mm-hmm.
take a lot of young people who've had a very highly dysfunctional, chaotic life, and they give them structure, meaning, purpose,
Mm-hmm.
rules, understandable things, outcomes,
Yeah,
and all that sort of
absolutely.
stuff. Those things are crucial in life. Otherwise, we lose the plot. We either get it that way in a relatively socially acceptable way, or we end up in a prison yard. I mean, those become the stark choices, right? So
You're right.
I understand what you're saying. You know
Yeah.
what you got
I
to do.
mean, so I will say, I just want to, and I'll end with, if you're in a place, right, and you feel that it resonates with who you are, it's valid, right?
Yeah.
My years of, from 16 to I would say 27, me being a dedicated, member of that organization, it was completely 100% a reflection of who I was. I was living completely authentically. But there reached a point where I realized that the only reason I was doing certain things or choosing not to do things that I know are benign was because of my dedication to being the archetype of what this religious organization
Yeah,
wanted a
I get
man
that.
to be.
I get that.
And that was
That was how you're
that was that
constructing
that
identity, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Then I had to decide, am I going to prop up this image or am I going to live authentically? And in that community, a lot of people go through this, but then they'll say, well, the devil's just testing your faith. So you need to plow through it and fake it till you make it. I just have in my life and the experiences that I've had, I am not willing to live disingenuously. That's why I joined the organization at 16, even though I had Southern Baptist family members
Yeah.
telling me your soul is going to hell. I didn't care. I'm doing it because it feels right. So when I reached that point in my life where I was like, you know what, this isn't sitting right with me. This is not who I am. I had no problem
Right. So
disassociating. Now I
why
kept
do you
going.
have that sense of it's really important to find your authentic truth and live it? Where does that come from, do you think, Brandon?
That's interesting. This is not the first time I've been asked that, and it's kind of controversial. I did not grow up with a family that I could trust, so I was never imprinted on with this idea that I needed to trust authority figures and that I needed to follow the status quo or I needed
Mhm.
to trust a system. That was never. I was never brainwashed into that concept. So I lived. My grandparents, although I was neglected, I lived my life in freedom, and it's a freedom I continue to pursue to this day.
No, I really, I mean, my brother and I, when you said the word feral, thankfully my mum's dead, otherwise she'd come and box my ears for me. But my brother and I were very much like that, uh,
Yeah.
because we came from this chaotic household where there was a lot of love, I mean, I have to say. Um, but we ran wild. We were wild weeds. And there was a joy and freedom in that I still remember with great bliss. And I'm still like that.
Mhm.
I'm not the typical corporate person. I can't fit into that structure, and that's okay. I've carved my own life and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff, but I'm also aware of where it comes from. And it's the truth, isn't it, Brandon? That we've got these choices to make about whether what we do with the cards that we've got in our hand, right? Why
Hmm.
did you choose not to go the antisocial? That's what I'm trying to get at. I understand that where this authenticity is coming from, you're striving to survive and grow. But it could have been so easy to just go the route of deciding to destroy people around you. I'm sure you've done a bit of that
Mm.
because we all get angry. Uh,
Mm.
is there anything you
No,
can point to that says that I chose the light rather than the dark? Do you know why?
I have to say this, Noel, before you go on, because I don't want that to be projected onto me. I never wanted to hurt anybody, and I any hurt that I inflicted, like I told you, is I became suicidal. I wanted to hurt
Ah,
myself. I
okay.
never wanted to inflict pain on anybody, and no, that is because of my desperate need for love. I love people. I've loved people that have hurt me. I continue to love people that have hurt me. I need love. I need to be validated. I need acceptance, and I need to be embraced in like warmth and kindness. So when I wasn't experiencing that in my life, it drew me into suicidal thoughts. I've never wanted to hurt anybody, and I still don't. I really
I
just want to
chose,
help
it's
people.
interesting. I chose pacifism at 14. I'm not a pacifist, but at a very young age, I realized that this anger I felt was not what I wanted to visit on other people.
Mm,
And you said about lacking father figures, but I lacked some father figures, but there were men at those times that were big men in the world, Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, etc., who
mm.
I looked to and I thought I aspired to that rather than others. Was there any of that going on in your life? Were there any other altar father figures? I guess the sort of movement into a religious organization was partly about that as well. There's that Judeo-Christian myth of the father,
Mm.
etc. Were there any other men around you that you could look to at all?
No, no, there weren't. And no, it's been, one of the hardest questions I've had to answer, throughout my life is who's your biggest role model and who's your biggest inspiration.
Right.
That's a very difficult thing for me to answer because I've never wanted to live anyone else's life. I want to live my life and I want to contribute in my own unique way. And I've always lived my life in such a way that I knew I would find that. But I would say joining the organization of the religious organization that I joined, that wasn't really searching for a father, that was searching for stability. It
Right.
was
Okay.
searching for it was searching for love. It was searching for stability. It was searching for so many of the things that I actually found. So
And that's
yeah.
great that you did. And but then at some point you go, this isn't authentic anymore. What was your next step? You said you were around about 27 and
Yeah, so by that point, I was married with three children. I'm still married with three children. Um, and I continued going through the motions, right? Because it wasn't important. Like some people who sort of stop believing in the tenets of their faith. Some people want to attack and or become angry at the institution.
yeah.
And I was angry for probably a week, and then I was like, "Wow, if I don't believe in the tenets of the faith and I don't believe the stories they're telling, why would I be angry at this
Yeah, well,
organization?
exactly.
Like, I mean, they really have no power over me except for the power I give them." And so that was very freeing. So I was able to continue to go and support my wife and raise my children in what I think is a you know it's good to have these traditions in a way, and there was really no other
So
place
your
to.
wife is still within that Mormon tradition and that's okay, or did she come out of it as well?
You know what, we are still part of the community. So,
Okay.
and yeah, in the Mormon community, I mean, you're in it until they excommunicate you or till you ask for your name to be removed from their records.
Yeah.
But no, we still have the people who are in our local congregation try and reach out to us and want us to come back to church. But and I don't feel any need to defend myself because I've been where they're at.
Yeah.
I've traversed a lot in my life, and I know that what I'm doing, and I know that my beliefs are right for where I'm at right now. So
Well,
they can reach out, and they can actually. I will let anybody pray for me. I'll take all the love I can get, but
Yeah,
I
right.
won't I won't revert I won't
Absolutely.
revert into a mindset and a belief system that I know no longer serves me.
And your wife was comfortable going in that direction with you, I guess, or was she frightened and found it a bit like, who is this guy?
We've been together for over 20 years. So,
Right.
it's anytime you're with anybody for any length of time and you stay together, you're going to have to be pretty vulnerable and open up. And she's been a big support. Like, she's been my biggest supporter. I would say that for, like, women in general have been my biggest supporters.
Super.
My aunts, right, growing up,
Yeah.
my wife, all of my trauma, Noel, has come from men. All of my trauma, from sexual abuse to physical
Right.
abuse, and even my mom's trauma
Yeah,
vicariously came from a man. So
absolutely.
there's this trend on social media like, would you choose a man or choose a bear? And I'm like, you know what? I'll choose the bear
I'll
too.
choose the bear, mate.
I'll choose the
I'll
bear.
choose the bear, without a doubt.
Men,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm sort of a bit more predictable, the violence from a bear. Do you know what I mean? You sort
right.
of know what it's all about. Um, and it's a great, that's a very powerful statement, and I want that to be heard because there are these myths and stories about angry men sort of replicating, and you've really explained that well. And but it's also I want to reflect on this that the reality is that with the background that you had the outcomes for people from that background are generally some form of institutionalization, whether that be military, whether that be prison system, or whether that be psychiatric systems, right? And it is extraordinary, your story. It's extraordinary story of transformation and change. Um, so you change your relationship to the Mormon community to one that's more authentic for you as a family. You don't burn bridges, which is, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And you're not the sort of person that wants to point blame. You want to keep growing. Um,
Yeah,
and
because if
then,
people are there and it's valid, it's valid, right? It's valid.
yeah,
If they need
absolutely.
it, they need it.
Yeah,
I gotta say, but I want to say this one piece. I learned a lot about the importance of religion. Um, I'm the I met a very devout member of the church,
yeah.
and we were having a private conversation, and he said to me, "Wow, I just don't understand how the atheist of the world." Now, this is a very devout Mormon man. He said, I don't understand how all the atheists in the world, the people who don't believe in God, aren't out there committing crimes and like stealing and raping. And
I
I
love
was
that.
like, wow. I said, wow. In my mind, I thought, you've just told me a lot about yourself. And for
That's
that
right.
reason alone, I'm very, very glad you're faithful to the Mormon church,
That's
because
right. Yeah,
otherwise, if you weren't
absolutely.
living committed to this faith, you would be an extremely dangerous person for
Yes,
me and my
right.
family. So you
Right.
stay, brother. You stay.
You
You keep
say
that
that's
testimony
right.
strong.
I'm
So I
with
will
you,
say,
mate. I'm with you.
the church is for the sick, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I
some
totally agree.
some of us have healed, and we don't need it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. And I'm with you. The reason I don't hurt people is because I would be disgusted by it. It's
Right,
like I don't need a law to tell me it's wrong. Do you know what I
right.
mean? I don't
But
need
but
that.
some do, and that's
Yeah, yeah,
scary.
yeah. No,
Let's let them have their church. Let's
yeah.
let them preach to us till they're blue in the face, because there's something inside them that really needs it. And if they need it, let them have it.
So I suppose what I'm getting to, I'll be more direct in my question. Certainly, my sense of myself is that I've always really been looking for safety. And when I found it, I've inhabited that safety and I've discovered that the safety is inside. And it never was inside when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And really, once I discovered that, and literally, I was talking to a friend about it. She was telling me about her daughter, who's bless her 4, and they were in the kiddies park at the kiddies section of the park on Saturday, and she said, I thought I'd do this experiment with her because she's very independent. I watched her, and she couldn't see me, but she decided to go and explore, and I just followed behind her. I
Mhm.
wanted to know when she would look back and go, "Mummy's not there," and she was always there. And she got
Interesting.
out of the park. And she started walking and exploring. And she said, I got really angry that she wasn't aware of danger. And then I went up to her and I told her off and said, "You should come and look out for me." And I said to her, "Do you know what that means, that your daughter feels like that? That means that you've given her so much love that she feels safe, and that safety allows her to explore the world without fear of the world. So what a
Hmm.
good job you've done, Mom." And I was always looking for that, and I never knew, and I don't know what you think about this, but I never knew that I could get that from other people until I discovered that I could get that. And once I discovered I could get it from other people, it was like, oh, this is the way you do it, right?
Mm.
This is how you do life. So was there a moment like that for you? Or was it marrying your wife? Was it having your children? Was there a point at which you realized that it was in what you did in the world with other people and what they put back inside you? Or was it something else altogether?
Yeah, I'll say that that concept that you just described, it kind of goes over my head. So
Was it?
yeah, that's sort of a worldview that I've not experienced.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time connecting with
All
that.
right. Let me try another way. You talked about having therapy
I saw a therapist once. It was
once.
actually a past life regression therapy. So for the first, it was a 5 hour session. And for the first 30 minutes, we just talked about my childhood. And she told me that, oh, yeah, Brandon, you were very neglected. And I said, oh, I never considered that. She said, well, you were. I said, oh, I always felt love. She said, but you were neglected. I said, okay. And then we did the past life regression
Okay.
therapy. And I didn't really go to therapy. I paid her to have this past life regression,
That's
but blah, blah,
lovely.
anyway.
But that story is really lovely. Oh, was I neglected? Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
like, okay,
I
that's
guess I
great.
was.
So tell me about you've shifted your relationship to more in the community. Your family's come with you. You've got this loving family around you. What was the next step for you then in your journey, in your story? What sort of age are we talking about now?
Well, I'm 42 now, so we're, I would say we were going to church, like every Sunday until
Yeah.
COVID happened, and then church kind of like stopped. And then once it started again, we didn't return. By this point, our kids had gotten quite a bit older, and um, they weren't really enchanted by the by the tenets of the faith or the culture of the community. Um, and it just was very uncomfortable. My wife felt uncomfortable. If she wanted to speak in her meetings, she felt ostracized. I know that, if I spoke, people thought I was weird. Just being neurodivergent and seeing life very differently. And it's funny because when people do reach out and they see me and they want us to return, I think you really you don't. You want an old version of me to return because if I returned with who I am today, you would quickly escort me out and you'd
Yeah,
want me
yeah,
to be
yeah.
excommunicated. You don't want me there. I will
No,
bring up
that's right.
all of your shadows and I will bring up all of your sins because I know the history of this church and
Yeah,
I will point out the racism and I will point out the misogyny and I will bring it
exactly.
all up to surface. So you don't want me there.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like you've used that system to help you very well, and you've learned some lessons from it and moved on. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
lessons that other people are not learning. They're just reading the script, but they're not really taking it on board what it means, right? So,
Yeah, people live for organizations and they live for their religion. I live for myself. I always have, and I always will.
yeah, yeah. So you've moved on from church. What I'm trying to get to is how you decided and what's motivating the decision to have this new networking site. What's informing you on that, and how you
Mm.
get to that point, I guess.
I would say the reason for that is because in my quest for friendship and
Yeah,
to have authentic relationships and to feel love and to be able to celebrate others and to not experience people who are envious or jealous. I've experienced so much of that that I've gotten tired of it. I've almost gotten tired of meeting people and being vulnerable because I've been hurt so much.
mm,
So I was like, what if there was a way that I could not only connect myself with people, but help others connect with other people who have a high degree of emotional intelligence? Because I will say all of my trauma comes from people who have no emotional
Yes.
intelligence, or if they
No,
do,
without a doubt. Yeah. Yeah.
or if they do have emotional intelligence, it's all channeled into their narcissistic
Yeah. It's
personality disorder.
sadistic form of it. Yeah.
Exactly. So the insipidus of this social networking project, I call it, is just to help people meet others who are on that similar emotionally intelligent aptitude.
And so, why choose social networking as such? What drew you to that, as opposed to say just setting up a local support group where you meet with some blokes, or what was the why are you attracted to the sort of social media side of things?
Thank you for asking. That's why I call it a project. I think, social media has done a lot to, even though we're much more connected, I believe social media has also played a huge role in us feeling isolated. So
Yeah,
it's this catch
yeah, yeah.
22. You're more
Absolutely.
connected, but you also are more isolated. So one of the things that is very different about what I have built is most of the social networks out there are really there to serve the ego. It's a great place, it's a platform. I don't call my what I've got going on a platform because it isn't a platform. The other things are platforms. It's a platform where you can put yourself out there in ways to get social recognition or to get compliments,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
you can share your job promotion, or you can share where you went last night at the fancy restaurant or your beautiful vacation, and you're looking for all of this praise and just social acceptance. I don't need any of that. What I need is real friends that I can talk to about real issues.
Yeah,
And you can't find that in any of those groups.
yeah.
So I set this group up as a place really for me, but because I know that I need that desperately, I know there are other people who do. And this isn't a platform. As a matter of fact, there's someone recently who was using it as their platform, just kind of like sending trying to send users away to their own thing. And I was like, you haven't engaged in any of these conversations about abuse and relationships. All you're doing is posting your content. What's going on here? And they never responded. And then, I had the account removed. And then, they fussed about it and were like, why would this happen? I was like, this is a supportive community. We're not here for a platform. If you want a platform, go. There are plenty of other
There are loads of
places for
them.
a
Yeah,
platform.
exactly.
You go find your platform. You go find your followers. This isn't about that. This is for people who want to connect with others and have deeply personal, deeply vulnerable conversations so that we can heal.
Okay. So tell me about how it's been constructed over time. So, I mean, obviously, has it got a name? How would people link into it? How is it moderated? How is it looked after? All of this sort of stuff. Tell me about that journey, if you like.
Well, yeah. So it's pretty simple. Well, you're in the UK, so you can't access the App Store, but anybody can access this community from going to like the web and typing in trueeq.app
Yeah.
with like app. So there doesn't need to be a www dot or anything like that. It's just trueeq.app. And for those who are listening to you that are in the USA and Canada, you can download TrueEQ from the Apple Store or Google Play.
Yeah.
But what it is you go in, you take an assessment. The first thing you do when you're getting onboarded is you take an emotional intelligence assessment. So
Right.
you're asked 15 questions. It's like a quiz. And based on your answers, you're going to get an EQ score. And then based on your EQ score and the interest that you place about yourself, you will receive connection suggestions. And these are people who have scored within your range of EQ and have similar interests to you. And if you accept those connections, then when you post in this platform, they're going to see your
Brilliant.
post and they can reply and things like that. So
And
that's how that works.
I mean, amazingly simple, which is fantastic. And things like, oh, sorry, I've got, for some reason, my camera, when I move certain hand positions, will do things like that.
Fireworks.
Fireworks, just because I've got the
Wow.
thumbs up. I have to learn to keep my hands below the camera level. But there you go. So amazingly simple, like a lot of these apps are, which is fantastic while they work. Tell me about these questions, where you got them from and how you formulated them, and what you sort of feel that they reveal and tell you.
So one of the most important things I think that I have done Although I've got graduate work in secondary education, I was a chemistry teacher. I didn't feel like I had the expertise to sort of. So I've partnered with social workers and like psychologists. I've
We should
also
know,
used.
just for people in the UK, social worker in America is often a psychotherapist. So often a psychology trained person. It's very different. Social worker in the UK is very different things. So people
Oh,
should
okay.
know, but I know. So LCSWs, those types, licensed
Yes. Yeah,
social.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've also relied on the work of psychologists in the emotional intelligence space
Yeah.
um, to formulate questions that all of the answers seem valid. However, they're very nuanced.
Yeah.
And based on the level of nuance, a highly emotional intelligent person is going to recognize which one of those answer choices is the most emotionally intelligent
Yeah.
versus the last option they would pick is still done and considered okay behavior by a lot of people, but it's just missing the mark.
Yeah. Okay. And it's a sort of because to create this sense of safety and support because you're asking people to be vulnerable. And as we know, vulnerability involves risk. Is there support for people or is it the sort of free for all? Tell me about how that actually operates and looks.
Well, the support comes from the community that you choose. And there are a lot of people connected on this network that are licensed. But again, it's not a platform, it's not for people to sell their services.
Sure, sure.
Um, the support is in the community. So,
Okay. And are there systems there for people to report if they think there's a problem, all that sort of stuff?
yeah, of course.
All
Yeah.
right. So there are safety systems in place. How long's it been going now, the app? How long's it been available and sort of how are people using it in your experience?
So the social network launched December the 13th of 2024.
Brilliant. So it's
So just a
brand
few
new, it's
months.
still a baby.
Oh yeah, it's still a baby. Yeah, it's still a baby, and I'm working, like I said, with the psych. You said what do you call them? Psychotherapists,
LCSWs is
LCSWs.
psychologists,
Um,
psychologists.
yeah, there's a large group of LCSWs who are looking to leave Meta, so they have these large communities on Meta, and they are work. I'm working with them to revamp TrueEQ so that's a bit more catered to their needs, so that they
Right.
can pull their followers and their people, their community, I'll say, into TrueEQ because it's an ad-free zone. It's it's a place of safety. It's a place where we prioritize empathy, which is under attack right now in America.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. We've seen, we've we've noticed, mate. It's you know what I mean? It's like
yeah, so
um,
there's this is the perfect opportunity for something like TrueEQ to get the buzz that it's getting with you and with other media platforms because you know it's under attack, but there's still hundreds of millions of people who see the value in empathy and empathetic relationships and being emotionally
yeah.
intelligent. So this is a safe place for that group of people to find a home.
Yeah, absolutely. And also hopefully to give you more friends because I mean it's great that that was part of the motivation. And that's such an honest, authentic motivation. I was feeling lonely, thought I'd do something about it. Um,
Right.
there is a truth, I think, and this is I mean I really identify with this, and I think it's something you said that when I because of the experiences I've gone through, I'm more emotionally intelligent really than I want to be. I prefer not to be as emotionally intelligent as I am. That's like a little
Ignorance
bit
is
of
bliss, right?
a little bit of shallowness is welcome. You're laughing because you get it as well.
No,
But
I do get it. I do get it. I do say I will say though that it does keep you safe in a way.
yeah,
Um, those predatory types, the narcissistic types, I will let them play their game or let them think they're playing their game, but I just know I'm very attuned to what's going on, so I play strategically with all those people. There's plenty of those people as well.
And I would also say, and I think this is really important, it's not partisan politics, but it is politics of a sort that I believe the world can be made better, and I work in that way to make it better. I don't work to make the world worse. I might get it wrong, but that's my intention. And it seems like you're that sort of person, Brandon. You
Mhm.
actually do
Yeah.
want things to be better.
Oh,
Um,
of course.
and that's really, really important that the condition of somebody's heart when they're offering something is very important to know. Like you said about the guy in the church who's, why don't all those atheists kill and eat everybody?
Oh
Because
God.
they'd be really upset, mate. That's why. Do you
Ah.
know what I mean? It's like, seriously, don't you get it?
No,
So
they
it's
don't.
like, I love that story. I'm going to keep it and repeat it if you don't mind. Um,
Yeah, that's fine. I will say that man is dead. He committed
yeah.
suicide. Yeah, he took his twins. They had Adderall for their ADHD, and he took all of their Adderall and killed himself.
Oh,
I mean, the hell he was living through, right?
but I
Mm,
think a lot of men are, we make up 75% of suicides now.
yeah,
And it's important that men take some responsibility for that, men like us. And we offer something, an alternative to the current projection of ultra toxic masculinity that exists.
absolutely. We can hold up the light.
I
It's
think
up.
so.
It's up to them to. They're going to have to
That's why I
find
was
it.
really excited when I saw the email about this. I went, this is interesting. I've got to meet this guy and see if it's what I
Thank
think
you.
it
I'm
is.
so happy we've met. Honestly.
Oh no, it's astonishing. Um, no, I'm going to finish on this point, and we do need to finish. I could keep going for hours with you, Brandon, but it is really important. I think the whole concept of creating spaces within the internet, if that's a comfortable way of saying it, that promote these pro-social uh, values of compassion, respect, emotional intelligence, and I think it's really important right now at this juncture in history that entrepreneurs like yourself are providing um, alternatives to the billionaire IT guys who clearly have no emotional intelligence
Right.
and are just making a buck. They don't give a shit how they make that buck, right? And
Yeah.
they are damaging people. And I think that's what I mean by this political statement. It's a political statement, a belief that these things are here, they're here to stay, but we actually can shape them in a way to make the world better. And it seems to me you're trying to make the world better, Brendan.
I hope so. No, I hope so.
Well, I don't know whether you'll achieve it or not, but you're trying.
You know what? If nothing else, I'm making the world a better place for me because I've got
That's
a
right.
large community
That's
that
right.
I can
High
relate to.
five, mate. Hey,
Boom.
that's the way. Oh, mate, it's so cool to meet you, and we'll stay in touch, no doubt. So tell us again how folks from the UK can log on to it. Tell us the web address.
TrueEQ.app.
Brilliant.
So TrueEQ.app.
Have you got a website as well where people could contact you, or is it through that app?
Oh no, I mean if people want to do a deep dive into the company TrueEQ,
Yeah.
TrueEQ is really an ecosystem of emotional intelligence resources. That is jointrueEQ.com.
Join TrueEQ, one word.com.
Yep, that's it.
Brilliant. I'll get my team. If you send those links to me, when the show goes out, I'll ask my producer to make sure the links are there so people have easy links to it.
Hey, before we go, can you and I connect on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So it's just my name, Noel McDermott.
I'll find you here. Oh, there's a couple of you. Hold on.
This is it. Blue shirt.
Public figure. That's it right there, I think. Does it say CEO, founder, public figure, mental health?
Yeah, Mental Health Works Limited. That's me.
8,000 followers.
Apparently.
Look at you, big dog. That's amazing. It gives me a follow option, but no connect. So I'll let you be the connector. I'm following you now, though.
All right. Okay. I'll
Big wig, the big wigs like you have their connections turned off. So,
have I got mine turned off? I don't know why.
well, no, I followed you. I think you can send a connection request, but
I'll
that way we
find
can.
you. I'll find you and send a connection request. Listen, mate, have a good day.
Thank you, Noel.
What I'd like to do, if this is okay, because it's early days for the this enterprise, and what I'd like to do is circle back maybe in a few months' time and catch up with you about how it's developed and who's involved. Because I'm really intrigued by I know a number of health professionals who are looking to get off these very toxic platforms
Hmm.
and move on to something that is more consistent with their values as healers. So I'm really interested in how that develops. And also, I mean, we'll reach out anyway and we'll sit up and have a chat about how we can network more professionally and so I
Hmm.
can promote the work that you're doing more effectively and
Thank you.
incorporate into what we're doing. Because I think we do need to be explicit in making these connections these days because there's a lot of danger in the world at the moment.
Yeah, yeah, there is.
There really
Yeah,
is, and it's real danger, and we have to be honest about that. That there's some very dangerous, toxic men in very powerful positions, and so it's important to do something about that, really. So
absolutely.
good to be part of that. You stay
Yeah.
there. Listen, folks, what an amazing show. Just because I got an email about a networking site, I'm so excited. I hope you've enjoyed it, folks. For those that may have been upset and disturbed by some of the material, either because you don't know these things exist or because you've been through them, remember you're not alone. These things make us want to disconnect and isolate, but don't do that. Do the opposite. Go and talk to people about your feelings. If you're feeling triggered into any sort of harming thoughts about yourself and you're in the UK, call the Samaritans and they're a great organization who will help you and listen to you. And sometimes we all need a damn good listening to. Okay, so have a safe day, folks, wherever you are. I'm going to say goodbye to you. Stay there, Brandon. Bye bye for now, and I'll see you all at the next well-being show. So thank you all for joining us.